once he gets into the season, he wants to focus on that season. So if there is no extension, we're into the regular season, I would not be surprised if he just waits until the 2026 summer before any decisions on his future.
Yeah, you and I have been talking about that focus, that renewed focus that Trae Young has, not going to the Jordan party with other Jordan athletes and instead being in Las Vegas, seeing his teammates working out, those sorts of little things. At times, Trae Young's leadership over the years has been questioned, and I really think this summer we've seen several instances of him really rising to the occasion. Shams, thank you so much for that insight and that reporting. I want to bring in Mr. Money Moves, Bobby Marks here, because whenever we're talking about contract negotiations, I need you to weigh in here, Bobby. How would you approach this with Trae Young?
I would approach it with an extension, but not at the 4 for 222 number here.
Okay.
I think we're in a day and age of roster building where you have to be extremely careful when you hand out max contracts where you're averaging out $55 million. And Trae Young is certainly an all-star level player. I'm not putting him up there in a top 15, maybe even top 20 in the NBA here. And I think I want to see how this roster develops. They certainly went out and got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Kennard, Kristaps Porzingis. They drafted Asa Newell. Dyson Daniels is also up for an extension here. I'm waiting out this season here. I'm offering him something, but it's not going to be at that 4 for 222 number.
Interesting. Do you think that that's the number that's a little too high for Trae? I don't like to count people's money.
Yeah, I don't either. But I think back on that quote that I was talking about when Kevin Durant said he thinks the 6-foot point guard might be coming to an end.
Oh, yeah, when he was on Mind the Game.
And this is what I think he was talking about, where you're saying, yes, Trae Young, statistically, what he brings to a game of basketball, I get it. At 6, what is he, 6'2"?
6'3".
6'2", 6'3". It's tough to say, can he switch on to a 5 at the end of the game? Can he guard a bigger guard? Can he, what are the other things that he can do besides score it? Can he make a 2-guard a scoring champion? Those are the things that we're thinking about and we're looking at when we're thinking of a smaller guard. You're thinking of a guy that can get guys going, that can pitch ahead, especially after seeing OKC and Indiana in the finals. You have to be thinking we have to change our game and change our style a little bit to make sure that we're pitching ahead, we're moving the baton, and we're making sure the other guys are getting off. If you don't have 3 or 4 guys that are weapons on your team, if there's only one head to cut off the snake, then it's going to be a tough day for him.
Basketball Reference is saying 6'1" here for Trae Young. Udonis, how are you looking at this?
I mean, I see Trae Young as a max talent. When you look at guys like Jalen Brunson and those guys, I see Trae Young as a max talent. This is a guy who hasn't averaged less than 24 the last 3 years. And by the way, he's either led the league in total assists or assists per game, so you can see how much of their offense that they are accounted for. When you look at what they've done, when they put Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's a great two-way player, you got Dyson Daniels, who was one of the top defensive players of the year last year, also most improved. You got Caleb Houston. We talked about what they do in Canada and those guys having something in Canada. This is a guy who shot over 50% last year, the second half of the season after All-Star break. You got Porzingis, who's a guy who can be a matchup problem offensively, shoot the 3, and also be a rim protector. So, yes, he's not going to be a guy that Trae is going to switch on, but you've put enough pieces and enough defense around him where you can protect Trae Young. The question with Trae Young is he going to show up an hour before practice? Is he going to stay 2 hours late after practice? Those guys in that locker room and in that organization have to believe that it is just as important to Trae Young as anybody else. If it's important to Trae Young, it will be important to everybody else in that locker room. That's where I think the separation is for Trae Young. How important is it, and can he lead this team to a championship and be that leader and that guy that's accountable? That's where he falls short. That's what he's working on. I love the fact that he didn't take the Jordan tour and he was there this year. That's the only thing I see him falling short of. But when you look at the numbers, you can put Trae Young numbers right up next to Jalen Brunson and all those guys, and his numbers will equal out.
Without a doubt. I second all the things that he said. I think that it's going to have to be a decision in Trae's mind of what does he want to be remembered for.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you have shown us all your gifts. You've shown us what you can do. And now to win and take the next step, that's where the breakdown of film has to be a little bit different. And we just want to see him take that next step. It's not that we don't care about the backs, but it's like you got to take a couple million less, take a couple million less, make sure your team is good, and keep playing where you want to play.
I also think that he has a real opportunity to do that this year differently than we've seen since they were able to in 2021, right? Because I sat down with Tyrese Halliburton in the NBA Finals, and we're certainly hoping to see him back on the floor soon. He said something, he didn't mean it as a diss. He just meant it as a fact. He said that after we made it to as far as we did in the playoffs 2 seasons ago, people looked at us and said, are we the Atlanta Hawks from 2021, or are we going to prove that this was not a fluke and we're going to get back there? the Atlanta Hawks have an opportunity to prove that they're still a team that's formidable, especially in an Eastern Conference that really is as wide open as I have seen. So if Trae Young and this Atlanta Hawks team, they've done an excellent job this summer, is able to maybe throw a punch in that Eastern Conference conversation, then it's going to be something really interesting to talk about, especially because, as Shams just said, Trae. Okay, so let's have some fun. It's our hit game, Who Said That, where I get to put on my game show voice, and we're going to take a look at some of the quotes that caught our attention and ask our esteemed contestants who said that. Sound good? All right, let's get it started. Shump, who said this? Quote, "No BS. I don't back down from anybody or anything. Everybody, to me, is the same." Was it Draymond Green? Was it Dylan Brooks? Or was it Isaiah Stewart? Welcome to the game, my friend.
Wow. I'm going to go with Dylan Brooks.
Was it in his first guest ever in Who Said That? Dylan Brooks. Ding, ding, ding.
Of course.
There you go.
Of course. But I just feel like they put cameras in his face a lot.
No bull. I would say, I don't back down from anybody or anything. Everybody's, to me, the same.
1 for 1. You need to play a minimum of 3 times to be on our leaderboard, but that is a very, very good start there. And I like, Dylan letting the scout breathe a little bit here in the summertime. Mr. Marks, you are up next, sir. Who said, quote, "I love him, of course, but that would be fire to get a poster on Jesus. That would be so cold. That's such a crazy flex." Was it Anthony Edwards? Was it Scotty Barnes? Or did Karl Anthony Towns say this? Wanted to put Jesus on a poster.
I want to say it's Anthony Edwards, but I'm going to pick Scotty Barnes.
Okay, we're going with a little bit of zigging when everyone else is zagging. Oh, it was Karl Anthony Towns.
Oh, it was neither.
Love him, of course, but that would be fire to get a poster on Jesus. That would be fire.
You're talking about
That would be
Ray?
so cold. That's such a crazy flex.
I thought he was talking about the Messiah.
Yeah. I don't want no poster on Jesus.
Yeah, that's what I said, bro. What you doing?
Udonis, you are solidly in the upper middle of the pack on our leaderboard here. So our next one is for you. Who came back from vacation and said, quote, "I thought Maximus was a real warrior. I'm going to go to the Coliseum screaming, Maximus!" And my tour guide said he's not real. Was it Tyler Hero? Was it Buddy Hield? Or was it Scoot Henderson?
Got to be my Bahamian brother, Buddy. He ain't had his conch salad. That's what it was. He ain't had his conch salad over there. Ain't no conch salad over there.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny too. I can picture him saying it. Well done.
Maximus is a real warrior. So I'm going to the Coliseum screaming Maximus, and my tour guy said he's not real.
Good for you, buddy. I'm glad you had a good vacation. I'm glad you had fun. And there was a little educational moment, too. All right, last one's for everyone. Let's come to a consensus here. Who said this? Quote, "I'm not a super anxious guy or anything like that. So on the plane, when I found out, I just kind of said, well, I'm traded." And I took a little nap. Was it Michael Porter Jr.? Was it Lonzo Ball? Or was it Colin Sexton? I would not have been able to take a nap.
Michael Porter Jr.
Michael Porter Jr. Bobby, you good with my
Michael Porter
MPJ?
Jr.
I agree with you, D.
Oh, it is Michael Porter Jr. Well done.
I'm not like a super anxious guy or anything like that. So on the plane, when I found out, I kind of just well, I'm traded, and kind of just took a nap afterwards.
I can't pull off a bucket hat. I'd like to, but
When you get buckets like that, you gotta throw the bucket on. Throw the bucket on.
be here for the rest of my career. I love this community and everything you've given me and my family. There's a lot more work to do. You guys deserve a championship, and I think we're just getting started here. Now, those championship aspirations, they got off to a little bit of a rocky start in 2024. Embiid, he would miss the first 9 games of the season due to injury and a suspension. When Embiid was on the floor to start the season, he did look good, though. 31-point game against the Bulls after missing the previous 7 games, a 27 and 9 rebound performance against the defending champion Boston Celtics. That one was on Christmas Day. However, the Sixers and Joel, they would start to struggle in February after a 7-game losing streak, and then the Sixers made that decision to shut him down for the remainder of the season with a lingering knee trouble here. So for the first time here on NBA Today, I'd like to welcome in Dotun Akintoye, who just released an excellent profile that's up right now on ESPN.com. I really encourage all of our readers to take a second to go and read it when you have an hour this afternoon. But you sat down with Joel Embiid several times throughout this story. What stood out to you the most in those conversations?
Well, thanks for having me first, Malika. I think Joel is an incredibly sensitive, incredibly complicated person. And I think there are some of those traits that are perhaps at odds with the role that he plays, which is a leader of an organization, a superstar. And I think he's been struggling with that ever since he's been cast in that role.
Yeah, I think sensitive was a really good way to put this. And the way that you explore what Joel Embiid has been through in this story was really interesting to me. Something that jumped out in your profile was just the amount of frustration, I think, that Joel has fostered throughout his career, especially with the organization. How did he express that to you? Because there was a couple of specific moments that I think fans may be surprised by the behind the scenes of.
Yeah, I think, we talked about continuity quite a bit, and it means something to him. I mean, in basketball terms, I think he has a sort of theory about roster consistency and what that does. He often talks about the Denver Nuggets and their championship, but I also think it means something to him in a deeper way than that. Trust for him is like a huge, not a concern, perhaps a fixation is maybe the better way to. And, one of the incidents of the last season was the leak in the fall after a closed door meeting that the team had. And he brought it up with me, and it's still bothering him very clearly. I think for him, it's a microcosm of certain fears he has and a certain history he has with the organization about people who maybe don't have his best interest at heart and who he can't rely on. So it's on his mind. It's a huge facet of his personality. And
one of the ways that I read it is he looked to sort of take back some of that control when he felt like that trust was spiraling. He talks about the behind the scenes of an interview he did this season with Lisa Salters. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think Joel was incredibly frustrated this last season, and he felt like no one was listening to him. And it felt, again, I think, of an echo of an earlier part of his career where he didn't feel listened to and he shut down. And I think not a similar thing happened this year in that, there was a lot of pressure on him to play and his body didn't feel right. And I think finally, and I think the conversation with Lisa happened in February, he had had enough. And he was going to speak his mind publicly and sort of state his position and then let the team deal with the fallout of that.
And that's when he said to Lisa, I may have to have surgery. The team was caught off guard by that, but that seemed to be, as he put it, his cry for help is the way that he described it to you, to sort of say, no, I need to be listened to here. And now he's describing this as the most important offseason of his career. And I think there may be some fans, just being honest out there, who may say, well, what about the last ones? We've heard this story before, right? Why does this feel different, and how does he plan on sort of wrapping his arms around this?
Well, he's approaching it, I'd say, carefully and aggressively at the same time.
Okay.
I saw him shortly after his surgery, and he was already in rehab. But I think also he's being careful in that he's not going to allow external pressures to force him back to the court before he feels he's ready to come back. And I think there's a big uncertainty. He doesn't know what body he's going to be returning to and what kind of player he's going to be. And it's difficult to ascend to the place that he's been as a player and then be anything else. So I think that's the thing that's on his mind, and that's why